Welcome back to the Well House Exorcism. This is your ghost of a host with the most, Shanna.
Hi.
Hi?
It's PJ.
No.
Yep.
Nope.
It's Puckwat PJ.
That's better. Okay, good. Seems like you got a little confused since you were in charge last week. All right. Well, welcome back to another episode, Honey Bunny.
So yeah, I was thinking of just talking about the Enfield house and there's just so many things. The Winchester mansion. I really wasn't sure what I was going to choose for this week.
So you chose none because I'm in charge. Don't get ahead of yourself
you sure?
now. Don't get ahead of yourself. Sure? I will never let you in charge again if you keep that up, mister. You did an excellent job. People were commenting on Facebook and on Twitter. They're upset because it made them question whether, it's actually real or not.
Yeah.
So shout out to...
I've been questioning it for years, so welcome to my... welcome to just my state of being when it comes to that topic.
Well, even Kyle has his own creepy thought about it. We finally get
creepy
to bring
thoughts
him
back!
So exciting. But this week, we are going to focus locally. We're going to focus on coal mines in Pennsylvania. Are you excited?
I am.
Good.
Because there's some haunted mine footage I want to talk about at some point on this show.
So I thought I would do a little background on coal mines in general because, not everyone's from rural Pennsylvania. Obviously.
And as someone who's been on the Lackawanna coal mine tour 3 times, I feel like I'm an expert.
So you're our coal mining expert?
One time I was in the 3rd grade when I went, and...
I did the Pioneer Tunnel twice. On field trips.
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about, yep.
Yeah.
And I got to ride the train once. I was very sad I never got to do it the other 2 times.
I ride it both times. Yep. I don't want to brag, but...
Very sad. I don't even remember riding the train. I just know I rode it. And the fact that it's not in my memory hurts.
Oh, it's very exciting. Sorry that you missed out. Anyway, so it sucks to be you. It's what you get for trying to say Enfield and all that kind of... No. You get out of here. All right, you must be from our area to completely understand the need and want of coal mines, in my opinion. Pennsylvania is one of the only areas with anthracite coal, which is the best coal for heating.
Mm-hmm.
During its heyday, we had many rich coal mining towns due to the world's need for this specific type of coal. However, digging into the earth for this mineral had its own dangers, from health ill effects to the ever-present fear of mine collapses. Walking through the woods in our area, you will definitely come across at least 1 or 2 small coal mines, and if you're not careful, you could fall down a small one. Which they tell you in the Pioneer Tunnel, that whole presentation.
Mm-hmm.
They take you out on the train, and they want to say, you see right there? That's an exposed coal mine. That's an exposed mine. Because people on their own farms would dig into their own earth and try to find coal. But since then, the world has moved to other forms of heating agents, so coal mining is a dying business, both monetarily and bodily. Pretty good. Pretty good.
Are we going to mention the most famous coal mine real quick?
I'm going to mention lots of stuff.
Okay.
So that brings us to tonight's podcast episode, The Sheppton Miracle. Now, had you ever heard of this before?
No.
No. Okay. It's pretty cool. It is not the most famous one, but it does rank in the top, I want to say, is it top?
So we're not talking about the most famous coal mine real quick?
The most famous coal mine or coal mine disaster?
Coal mine disaster.
Shh. I have a whole list.
Okay.
We're going to go over all of them.
Excellent. Okay.
Okay. So, the Sheppton Miracle is one of the area's most famous coal mine disasters due to its inclusion of almost death and death for somebody. Complete darkness, not unlike The Pit and the Pendulum by Poe. Otherworldly entities, possibly alien, but most likely angelic. A pope. And maybe some light cannibalism. All the above. It makes for quite the story, as you will soon find out, Puckwat PJ. But first, I would like to acknowledge my references for this evening. Coal Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit by Maxim W. Furyk, and Sheppton, The Myth, Miracle, and Music, also by Maxim W. Furyk. I would also like to personally thank our devout listener, Penny, for buying me the Sheppton book, which is personally signed by the author, and for letting me borrow the Hoodoo book. It's made for some awesome reading, couldn't put it down. And shout out to Kyle, who also has the Hoodoo book, and he said he finished it and he loved it.
My references are a couple trips to a coal mine.
And your brain?
That's about it. That's what I got.
You are such an expert this evening.
I bring a lot to the table.
You do, literally. I see there's so much in front of you.
Yup. There's a microphone.
Right.
I have this joke book.
No, this is a scary pot. Again, this is... Anyway, before heading into the book and the story, I feel...
go into the book?
Yes, you're going to dive right into it. Deep dive. Get your diving gear ready.
Okay.
I feel it's necessary to create a backdrop of coal mining for our listeners abroad. Again, if you're not familiar with our area, you have no understanding of the impact of coal mining. And then, of course, the impact of the loss of interest in it later. So many once booming coal mining towns are now destitute, and they just cling to their memories of the past. It's heartbreaking. We used to work at Mount Carmel, and it was a coal mining industry, as was its sister school, Shamokin.
Yep.
And you hear
Northumberland, Coal Township, all those places.
Outside of Hazleton.
And even down West Virginia, there's
Kentucky.
Welch, West Virginia, which anyone who's read Glass Castle, that's an old coal mining town that just is a shadow of its former glory.
Well, and it's just really sad because you hear them talk about their days and how great they used to be and how rich they used to be. And now it's just these shanty towns, Oh,
yeah. It's so sad to drive through those towns.
Yeah. Added to this, of course, is the fact that so many men risk their lives daily to bring coal to the surface of the earth for use. Their constant work in the bowels of the earth led to many health issues like black lung and cancer and ever-present dangers like cave-ins. Would have thought. So, black lung, you know what it is.
Yes.
What is it?
It is continually breathing in soot and coal dust and everything for continuous periods of time, and it clings to the inside of your lungs, and you just have this horrible cough and can't breathe properly.
Yep. It is. They actually call it CWP as well, but black lung is the common name. So in 1831,
coughing with penalties.
Yes, yep, that's what it is.
I nailed it.
In 1831, a doctor in Edinburgh, Scotland, described black lung for the very first time in medical books. During an autopsy of a coal miner, the doctor stated that the man's lungs were, quote, a black carbonaceous color. So they're black lungs. And he concluded that it must have been because of the, quote, habitual inhalation of a quantity of coal dust, which, of course, is what is seen in a coal mine constantly. And something that's important, too, to note is when you're breathing in coal dust, from what the book said, it feels like you're getting stabbed by little shards of, daggers the whole time. Yeah, so when you're down there, you take a deep breath in of coal dust, you feel like you're being stabbed by it.
Oh, my gosh.
That's what they put up with to get us coal.
All day, every day.
Yeah. Of course, another issue is cancer. In 2011, a peer-reviewed study found that cancer rates are nearly double in coal mining industries over others.
Wow.
Especially in the areas where you've done mountaintop removal mining. So something about that just kind of brings cancerous agents to the surface, like asbestos, for example. Yeah, but if you live in a town like that, cancer almost double. Now, of course, in the mines themselves, there were ever-present dangers. So while cave-ins are the most obvious problem that we think of, because you mentioned that we are going to discuss some of the most famous and most disastrous mining issues, there were other problems that were just as dangerous. So I went to Howden.com for this. According to Howden.com, one issue was methane gas. This gas is highly flammable and explosive. Another issue was constant water drainage issues, which you don't really think about. But if it's raining above ground and the water comes down, it's right to you, you're in trouble. So if there was no pump to remove the water from the mines, miners would drown. If ventilation was not properly maintained, miners would suffocate or explode. So that's actually called fire damp. Another gas, commonly called black damp, is carbon dioxide, not monoxide. That's a different one. It is a colorless, noxious gas that only gives off a slight acrid smell at higher concentrations, so it makes it very hard to identify through our human senses because our noses aren't as good as dogs, right?
Yeah, we can smell it from cars and things like that because it's high concentrations.
It leads to asphyxiation in humans. The early symptoms of black damp are drowsiness, dizziness, and lightheadedness, which can just be mistaken for fatigue because they're working 10 to 12-hour shifts where they're shoveling coal,
Yeah.
so they're exhausted. But of course, lethal doses of carbon dioxide leads to asphyxiation, and that can result in death within seconds, which is horrifying.
Yeah.
Next on the list of gases was, of course, carbon monoxide, which we commonly called white damp. So you got your fire damp, you got your black damp, now you got your white damp. It's colorless and odorless and is therefore very hard to detect. That's why it's called the silent killer. And so you've heard the stories like, taking canaries into coal mines.
Yep.
Because it kills small animals faster than us.
Yep.
Yeah. So moving on, the last one was called stink damp, which I think is hilarious, but it's hydrogen sulfide. So it smells like rotten eggs, yeah. It is highly toxic, and it's capable of causing death in humans via asphyxiation. In lower levels of it, though, it will irritate your eyes, your nose, and your throat. As it increases, it has a narcotic effect on your nervous system, which causes headaches, dizziness, and difficulty breathing. At higher levels, it suppresses oxygen in the blood and tissues, which results in paralysis of the respiratory system, and ultimately death in severe cases. Oh, also, it's flammable. So watch out.
Well, I mean, if your respiratory system gets paralyzed, I'm pretty sure death is about to follow.
Oh, yeah, so how happy for that, yeah, right?
Eek.
So, yeah, those are the constant issues. You have the worry of black lung, the possibility of cancer, which they're just finding now is like a common thread. Then you have all these different damps down there. So men who would go down daily, they have my utmost respect because they're risking their lives daily.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it was shown by the sheer number of mining accidents just in our area. The first one was on September 6th, 1869. That was the Avondale Mining Disaster. It claimed the lives of 108 miners, as well as 2 men who were trying to rescue them. And of course, it was in Avondale, PA. There was also the Twin Shaft Disaster in Pittston, PA. That was on June 28th, 1896. 58 men and boys died. Then on April 7th, 1911, the Anthracite Mining Disaster occurred. That killed 72 men and 1 helper. They died via a large explosion and fire.
Eek.
So the one you're probably talking about was the Knox Mine Disaster with the Susquehanna River. Is that the one you're thinking of?
No, I was talking about Centralia.
Okay, well, so I didn't put that one in here because that's
yeah.
But anyway, so you can discuss that in a second.
Okay.
But the Knox Mine Disaster is probably the most famous. It's taught in schools and discussed for its horrible conclusion. While not as many men died in this as the Avondale Disaster, this is the famous story of the Susquehanna River engulfing the illegal mine. On January 22nd, 1959, 12 men died from a whirlpool of river water gushing into their mines. 74 men had been in there, and thankfully 62 men were able to escape. Of course, it wasn't good news for the other 12 who passed away. This mine, to put in context, extended well out under the Susquehanna River, according to ExplorePAHistory.com, because I went on there. The Knox Coal Company and its lesser Pennsylvania Coal Company, which gets a lot of flack, and, we have a lot of our own stories here with union disasters and whatnot. They had ignored map stop lines, which is where mining could not take place because of inadequate roof thickness, and they continued to mine off course. State law at this point prohibited mining within 35 feet of a riverbed.
So we're going to go under it.
Yeah, but the river slope mine came within 19 inches of the Susquehanna.
Oh my gosh.
Can you imagine 19 inches?
They must have heard it above them.
They did. Less than 2 feet of rock and gravel separated miners from 10 billion gallons of water. The roof gave way. Water rushed in.
I wonder why.
I know. And with this, most mining, especially deep mining, ended, at least in the Wyoming Valley. So, honestly, the Knox mining disaster kind of ends coal mining as an industry. There still are, coal mining the companies that exist today, and the Sheppton miracle happens in 1963, so it's still happening 4 years later, but you have this obvious issue where people are dying, and it's really because the owners of the companies just don't care.
Yeah.
They ignore the obvious issues because money is more important than these people. So you want to discuss Centralia. Now, I didn't include that because of no one knows exactly what happened, but for our listeners, go ahead.
So the reason why I'm bringing it up is because it is a worldwide phenomena. Scientists, geologists come over from all over the world every year to study Centralia. It was a nice little town, until they say the general consensus is someone was burning their garbage near a mine shaft.
Well, they used to use mine shafts to burn garbage in because it would be below ground then too, right? Smart idea.
He caught a vein of coal and it ignited, and that was back in the 60s, and it's still burning today.
Now, recent data shows that it's actually slowing down, right?
That's what some people think.
I think Jack told us
or
that.
It's like maybe it's just going deeper, so we are not seeing like the smoke rising from the ground. But yeah, it seems like it's starting to slow down.
Yeah, they tried dumping water in and everything to try and put the fire out, and it just didn't work.
Yeah, I remember driving through it as a kid and seeing smoke coming up from the ground. It was crazy.
Pretty cool.
It was really cool. I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, but Centralia, of course, everyone was told to evacuate. Some did not. There's still a couple houses there. Chose to live there. Yeah, isn't there still a mayor?
I think so. Yeah.
Of course, it is the basis for a video game.
The visual basis, and only for the video game movie. Yeah, when they were making Silent Hill the movie, they used the look and feel of Centralia to make their stage, to make the sets and everything.
I just learned something.
Yeah.
There we go. Well, all of this, then, sets the background for the Sheppton miracle. It was August 13th, 1963, in Sheppton, PA. The mine? An anthracite coal mine owned by the Felon Coal Company. One of the men trapped was actually one of the co-owners of this company, David Felon. And now we'll take a pause and do our Kyle's Creepy Thought. Yes, I know, it's crazy. We have Kyle's Creepy Thought for the first time in a long time. Thank you, Kyle. If you listen to our brother-in-law and sister-in-law's podcast, The Liminal Unlimited, they are back from their summertime hiatus, and they mentioned us in one of their episodes, actually, on exorcism. So thank you for the shout-out. Go ahead.
I think one of the people. I thought it would be a good idea if we turned Shanna into the girl. I thought it would be a good idea if we. I thought it would be a good idea. I thought it would be a good idea if we turned Shanna into the girl from Ringu.
This is bad. This is really bad. It's Ouija.
Oh, so nice to hear that again.
It's been a while.
It has.
It's been
so
quite a while.
So nice. All right. So he is responding to our Amityville episode. So go ahead, PJ. What does Kyle say to us?
All right. So this is his message from that he sent us on Facebook. And he said, I just finished listening to the Amityville episode and I liked it. Not so much a creepy thought, but you should watch My Amityville Horror. It's a documentary about Danny Lutz. He talks about how George Lutz was into the paranormal and the occult and bought the house specifically because of the murders and the negative energy. He was trying to produce Phenomena. That's why it started. And
Phenomena. Okay.
And ended with them when they left. So, it explains why no other family had anything going on in the house. But Danny confirms that there was Phenomena happening.
Thank you for giving me a pause.
Which included getting thrown down a staircase, even if the book was embellished to make it sell better. The hoax stuff actually didn't start until George got into a dispute with the publishing agent over money and rights. The agent decided to tank everything to get back at George by telling the media it was all a big lie. I think the book and the movie are obvious frauds, but it's been established since then that George was an occult practitioner, which backs up Danny's story, and he says that stuff did happen and they were so scared that they ran. Other than that documentary, he's not super public about it and doesn't seek out opportunities to make money off of it.
Yeah.
So I kind of believe Danny. More than the Warrens, who had a tendency to believe that could override their skepticism too often. Plus, they needed hauntings to fuel their books, and speaking of engagements which over time can cloud judgment. Anyway, just my thoughts after listening.
We have to watch that now.
Yeah, I saw clips of it, but I couldn't really find the whole thing to watch.
Well,
so
maybe Kyle owns it and we just steal it from him.
Yeah, I do want to watch it. And the movie.
Watch Ryan Reynolds.
No, not that one.
With the beard. Thank you, Kyle. I agree. I want to believe it's real just because it's such a fascinating story. You know, apart from the pig. Like, that's when you've gone too far. I'm sorry.
He's the bestest pig.
Oh, wow. Look at him now. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, so thank you, Kyle. I agree. And I want to hear creepy thoughts from here on out. Let's go. Chop, chop. Get back. Now that you're back in the saddle, don't stop. All right. So now let's discuss the Sheppton miracle. As I said,
Let's dig in.
okay, that's actually pretty good. I'm not going to lie. I'm not even going to roll my eyes, though. I'm proud of that one.
Let's get buried in information.
We're going to get buried, and then we're going to possibly see a pope and eat people. But it's fine.
Whoa.
It's fine. Yeah, it's going to get real.
Never
So
thought those two would be juxtaposed together, but let's...
I know. So let's go ahead. It was a Tuesday. As I told you, it was August 13th. 13th. Just saying. Shortly before 7 a.m., 3 men were underground beginning the day's work. They were Dave Felon, Hank Throne, and Louis Bova. Shoveling coal into the prehistoric buggy, they were just completing their usual job. About 8:50 a.m., they sent a loaded buggy up the 40-foot slope. What happens is the buggy is connected to cables and is drawn up the slope on iron rails. It's dumped out and then sent back down empty for more coal. If you have seen any coal movie, you know exactly what we're talking about.
Yep. Sometimes they had donkey carts, too, but...
In this case, they had cables.
Yep.
So the donkeys had the day off. On this day, as the buggy was headed back down, empty, the hoisting cable snapped, sending the buggy off the iron rails and pummeling down 300 feet into the depths. On its careening path down, it took out wooden beams that were there to support the roof. From there, broken rocks and coal flew down at the miners like bowling balls. The structural timber beams fell down, bringing the roof with it. The escape route was caved in, with tons of debris for almost 70 feet above the miners. There was no way out. They were trapped 331 feet below the surface of the earth. Now Felon, who was one of the co-owners, knew what happened immediately. However, he was on the ground, body aching. He couldn't see through the particles of dirt and rock. The air was clogged with dirt and coal dust. He tried to breathe in 2 gasps of air, but he sucked in the tiny daggers of coal. Throne recollected later that after the first cave-in, there were 5 or 6 others. Due to the debris and gravity, this forced them to continually look for safe places to hide. He stated, "In the first hour and a half, we just sat there against the wall while debris piled higher before us in the tunnel. The rumbling from the cave-in lasted that long. There were others later." And something I want to talk about too, but it's important, is when these cave-ins happen, it is so loud that your ears are ringing. It's like shooting a gun in a basement, as we mentioned before,
Yeah.
right? But like that constant sound, it's awful. And so Throne's ears were just ringing like nonstop, like he had tinnitus. When the first cave-in happened, Felon and Throne were on one side of the railroad tracks and Bova on the other, due to the fact that Bova had been the one to signal the buggy to be pulled up initially. After that cave-in, they were able to verbally talk to him. Bova stated that his leg was broken badly and he was in extreme pain. After this, they never heard from him again. The assumption is that after the cave-ins, he was killed. Felon and Throne survived in what miners called monkey shafts. These were small shafts set apart from the main shaft where the men usually would store supplies, but that they could dive into for safety during a collapse such as this. This monkey shaft was about 6 feet high and went to about 18 inches in the rear. While they would have to search for other monkey shafts throughout their 5-day ordeal, the most commonly noted prison in which they lived was 9 feet by 14 feet. It was tiny. And so what happens is, in the story, the size and location of their prison changes because within like 5 days they had to keep searching for different monkey shafts pretty much as they're crawling looking for safety. So I'm going to stick with the 9 feet by 14 feet as a general idea of how small their safety was.
Yeah. Jail cell sized, essentially. A little bit bigger.
So how big is a jail cell?
8 by 12, I believe.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So this is their 2 men stuck together in here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And of course you're thinking oxygen, right? Adding to the frequent cave-ins was the near and total darkness. The power line to the work lights broke. So for the first few hours, the only light they actually had was from their helmets. But those lamps burned out as well. The matches wouldn't burn down there in that pit, so for all the days they were there, they sat in darkness, but not in quiet. The continual fall of debris went on for all the days, so they couldn't even have a moment of peace. In complete darkness, Felon and Throne searched for Bova and a way out on their hands and knees. All the while they breathed in the dust and coal, choking constantly. They were literally buried alive and had a constant fear of lack of oxygen, lack of water, and coal smashing down on them. In an instance of practicality, the men found all the loose and broken timbers they could and propped them against the roof of the chamber for protection. The roof line was so low that they could not stand. They had to crawl. Felon, a man of much mining experience, knew they would struggle with hypothermia, claustrophobia, dehydration, and madness from the lack of light. So, PJ, so far, how you doing?
I hate all of this.
Yep, me too.
Oh, this is terrible.
The biggest thing for me is like stuck in one small room and it's completely dark, and knowing that we're running out of oxygen, like that would just cause me to hyperventilate. Like
claustrophobia would kick in very fast.
Yeah. And so it's interesting to hear Felon's story versus Throne, because Felon is an older man. He has seen it all, done it all. He could, even like when he heard the sound of the rock falling, he could pinpoint how many feet of rubble was between them and the top of the ground. Like he's like, I assumed it was about 70 feet of just debris. And he was right. It was 71.
Huh.
Then you have Throne, who's 28, and it's like, this is new to him. And he's like, we're going to die. We're going to die. So having one of each in there. So to offset dehydration, because Felon knew this was the biggest issue, he had them suck as much moisture as they could from the wooden timbers that they had propped against the roof. They also found a small stream running through the mine. Sadly, they had to resort to drinking from a brackish and stinky pool of sulfur water. They also chewed on small pieces of wood to fill their stomachs and to stop their hunger pangs. The probability of hypothermia was very high. The mine was 50 degrees. Now, while in Pennsylvania we joke that 50 degrees is t-shirt weather, and we start putting on shorts and flip-flops, being in a mine at this temperature continually can actually cause frostbite. If human body drops below 95 degrees Fahrenheit, hypothermia sets in.
Mm-hmm.
So Throne and Felon both knew this was what was happening to them. They could feel their core temperatures dropping. Throne's body started shivering and his teeth chattered so badly he had to actually clamp his mouth shut. And even though he fell on his face initially and got beat up in the face and his mouth was like in so much pain, he had to clench his mouth shut so his teeth would stop chattering.
Mm.
Yeah. They did the only thing they could to offset hypothermia. Throne stated, to keep warm, I'd sit with my legs spread and David would sit between my legs with his back to me, and I'd breathe on his back and neck. All the time we'd be rocking back and forth also to keep warm. Then David would switch and do the same to me. We'd do this for 5 to 10 minutes at a time. Then we would stop, but only for 5 minutes, say, because then we'd be cold again. Most times it felt like 30 degrees above zero. Felon added to this by stating, to keep warm, we'd sleep face to face with our arms around each other. We'd sleep maybe half an hour, and then the cold would wake us, and we'd start rocking again to get some circulation. Which I think is pretty smart. And again, whatever it takes to stay warm. And actually, they were wearing thermal underwear and everything, too, and they were still that cold.
Yeah. Well, like when we go, if you've ever been into a cave or a mine, you know that it gets cold down there very quickly.
A sweatshirt.
Yeah, every gift shop sells hoodies,
Yep.
And they always recommend wear pants, bring a sweatshirt because it's cold in there.
Well, even, Penn's Cave, same thing. Ooh, we went there in summertime. It was like 90 degrees outside. We went down on that boat. We're like, oh, it feels so good, natural AC. And then, like, you're halfway through, I'm really cold. And the kids are shivering against you, and they're in coats.
And then the boat, comes out into the lake, and you hit the sun. You're like, oh, yes.
And then it starts feeling humid because you're on water. You're like, I want to go back in the cave. And then you're cold again. Anyway.
And also, the blackness of it, too. Because you don't experience pitch black often. There's always ambient light from either moonlight or street lights or whatever. There's always some kind of light. So it's not pitch black. But down there, it's nothing.
Yeah. Well, and for a while after their lamps went, there was a story that, of course, that Felon has a watch. And so that gave him a little bit of light. But even that didn't work after a while. So, and he knew that they would have partial blindness for a while because lack of vitamin A. So, Felon knows everything, and he knows what's happening, so he's trying to stay calm, and he is very much religious, so he was praying constantly as well. But the worst part for them of being stuck in the cave-in, though, as you said, is the claustrophobia and the madness that can ensue. Edgar Allan Poe's The Pit and the Pendulum showcases exactly what can happen to someone who has no brain stimulation. We discuss that in detail with the Klondike, or solitary confinement, from Eastern State. This happens to miners too, but they call it miner psychosis. This hit Throne the worst, because again he was the youngest and had not lived through the experiences Felon had. In one moment he stated, I must have been off my rocker a little. I yelled at Davey, Dave, I'm going home. I'm going alone if you don't want to come. Bye.
Oh, you know the way out? All right.
I guess I'll follow.
Well, let's go.
He also elicited madman screams. I couldn't imagine being stuck in
Yeah.
a small room with that, He also said that he experienced vivid hallucinations. He said, I saw a door. Davey, I yelled, let's go there. I crawled toward it, but suddenly found myself bumping into another piece of timber. I got a bruise under my eye. I was so frightened I just went wild. I crawled like mad away from Dave and fell into a hole. I found myself yelling as loud as I could, and the echo came bouncing back to me. Exhaustion is what finally calmed me. So he definitely went insane.
Mm-hmm.
Fallon kept it together, but anyway, they both experienced what can either be called hallucinations or ghostly visions. They both saw extraordinary images that appeared before them. They witnessed human-like figures with lights. The miners recall they hollered for light and crawled toward the figures. They were bathed in that luminosity, and in it they felt fantastically wonderful and weird at the same time. The figures were dressed in strange spacesuits with softly glowing lanterns attached to their helmets. They stood on a majestic stairwell that rose higher and higher, that even went beyond the vision of the miners. Throne stated, the lights and figures always were in front of us, but the more we crawled toward them, the further away they got. For example, I saw this man, or the dark shape of a man with a light on his helmet. I yelled, show me some light over here, over here. Dave saw him too, but the shape of the man got smaller and smaller as we crawled toward him. Then he was gone altogether. And so, there's conversations that, are there aliens deep underground? And
Hollow Earth.
Exactly. It's a hollow Earth, yeah. So, I don't think it's aliens. Sorry. Even with Skinwalker Ranch, currently, looking into that.
If we ever do aliens, though, I want to talk about the Dulce base and
absolutely
everything because that's a wacky.
Well, the Sheppton
theory.
book actually has a whole chapter on Hollow Earth, and I was like, moving on. I could see it more as angels trying to keep them calm, because when they were in the light, it kept them calm and it made them feel better. But aliens can do that too, and they were in spacesuits. So if people wanted to be an alien, it could be an alien. All right, whatever. But the most amazing thing, I think, was the door that appeared to them. Now, from the text, it stated, the darkness turned into a scene of wonder as they both saw a doorway outlined in a bright blue light. So, you've thrown talking about doors here and there, but they both at the same time saw this. Fallon was actually quoted. He said, on the 4th or 5th day, we saw this door, although we had no light from above or from our helmets. The door was covered in bright blue light. It was very clear, better than sunlight.
Moria.
If only they had said, friend. 2 ordinary-looking men, not miners, opened the door. We could see beautiful marble steps on the other side.
One was wearing a wizard hat.
We saw this for some time, and then we didn't see it. But there's a full discussion of what was inside the door, and it wasn't the mines of Moria, because they're already in the mines, PJ. Inside the door, the men saw a sweeping set of marble steps that looked like piano keys almost. They saw an aura that shimmered with an unearthly brightness. They also saw a garden that stretched as far as the eye could see with colorful bright flowers and green grass. Fallon felt he was looking at heaven, at the Golden City. Angels and children played harps. He saw his relatives sitting in orderly groups on the steps. He recognized many of them, and even if he didn't know them by name, he sensed his relationship to them, and that they were his ancestors. Their presence made him feel very protected and calm. He heard a celestial choir, and he said it was the most beautiful, exquisite music he'd ever heard. Now, Throne has his own vision through the door, and he sees similar things, but he's not looking at Fallon's family, of course, but he also sees the door open. He sees the 2 people. He hears music. That's why it's called, Miracle, Myth, and Music. But what is most amazing about this story is they both saw Pope John the 23rd, XXIII. You read that if you want to.
Okay.
Yes. They said that he watched them and smiled. His arms were folded respectfully, and they took that as they just knew that it was a sign that they would soon be rescued. In a point of fact, Fallon was a devout Roman Catholic, and he had been praying with Throne for the last 5 days of rescue. Also, Pope John had passed away 10 weeks prior to the mining accident, so it's important because he's dead and they're seeing him. And of all the things, now Fallon and Throne never changed their stories, but especially for this, they never recanted this story. They saw the Pope. And Fallon even so much believed that the Pope stayed with them until they were rescued. He said, quote, he was always a little bit to the rear on my right side and stayed with us all the time. Now, people don't know Catholicism. They don't know who Pope John is. But he was both beloved and hated by Catholics because he was the good Pope. And he's the one who chose to bring, to quote the text, to bring the Catholic Church kicking and screaming into the 20th century. We love him. He was celebrated by liberal Catholics and hated by conservative ones. He was known to actually go out into the world and meet with his flock. So you'd see him visiting, like polio-stricken children and going to visit inmates. He would also attend parishes all around Rome. And he was also known to stroll around the city at night by himself, which gained him the nickname of Johnny Walker. But he opened the Vatican II Council.
Yep.
And that became his legacy. It made the Catholic Church relevant again. It allowed the use of other languages for church and prayer, i.e. English, which is so nice to not be talking in Latin.
Yeah, Vatican I, the priest had his back to you the entire time, and only the whole thing was in Latin, like you said. So
yeah, there's no connection. It was It had other updates too, because he wanted the church improved and more modern. To this day, it is seen as controversial, and there are groups who still refuse to follow his changes. So you can go to churches that are all Latin all the time, and so those still exist. But anyway, his connection to the Sheppton miracle is one of the reasons he was canonized as a saint, because it was a miracle that happened after he'd passed away.
Because you need 3 miracles to be a saint. Yep.
All are in agreement that he would, of course, be the person to visit these men in a time of crisis because they're regular people that he would visit his flock. So regular people asking for help, so he was there, which I think is kind of cool. So anyway, not long after his visit with the men, they were finally found and rescued. A borehole was used to drill down to the men. In a miraculous turn, Felon's brother actually is the one who told them where to drill. He said, right here. He put his X upon the spot, if you will, right? Yep. And so David Felon down below said that when the drill came through the roof of their cave-in, it almost hit him in the head. But on August 27th, the steel drill that was used to create the 17.5-inch borehole was removed. Seeing that the hole was full of ledges and dangerous and irregular crevices, the men realized using pods to get them out would be impossible, because the plan was to send these pods down, put the men in it, and drag them back up. But there was just no way with all the different ledges. So their plan then was to extricate these guys by pulling them basically to safety in parachute overalls and lots of grease. Because again, it's a 17.5-inch hole. I don't know if I could fit through that. I'm like 17.5. So attaching the men to harnesses, they were pulled up and out of the cave through the tight borehole. Throne was pulled up first because Felon felt he should not be left alone in the pit due to his hysteria. For poor Throne, who does have claustrophobia, it took 15 minutes and 45 seconds to pull him out. And the finagling of his body and rotating his body to fit through some of the harder areas. But for Felon, it took 8 minutes and 15 seconds. Throne stated that having a blast of regular air to breathe was too much, and it actually knocked him out. After being down in the cave for so long, it was just too much oxygen. But in total, those men were trapped in the rubble for 14 days. After being airlifted to the Hazleton General Hospital and cared for, they were finally safe and returned to their family. But this is a scary podcast. So there's more.
I'm ready.
Obviously, we have already mentioned ghosts, possibly aliens, the Pope, and heaven. We've seen the next world. But as I mentioned, there were 3 men initially. Bova, the broken-legged, haven't heard from him in 14 days, Bova, was never found. Not long after the success of saving the first 2 men, the borehole was sent down to find Bova in the location where they were told about he should be from the 2 men. They sent down a camera and a microphone through the borehole and saw what looked like a human figure sitting against a wooden mine prop. But there was no movement detected. So they decided this is probably a retrieval mission, not so much a rescue mission for Bova. Because having a broken leg, having known that,
Yeah.
So Andrew DeBritko offered to go down in the borehole to find Bova's body. When he reached the bottom, he found a plug used to close up the 12-inch borehole, a piece of rope that looked like human hair, and a miner's helmet placed on top. That is what the camera had picked up. There were no bones. There were no clothes. This led to the speculation that Felon and Throne had resorted to cannibalism in order to survive. The idea was that they ate Bova because he was already hurt and or the smallest of them, because according to some research, Bova was 120 pounds, the smallest of all of them.
Oh, wow.
However, a complete lack of bones and body disproves this because humans don't and usually can't eat bones.
Yeah.
Crunch, crunch, crunch. Now, this doesn't stop speculation that the men did in fact eat Bova, and Bova's son, to this day, still believes his father was eaten by Felon and Throne. Throne was quoted as stating, "I don't even like meat." Like, when asked that question, Felon said that only evil men could insinuate that he would do that to stay alive. So, unfortunately, our world has many stories of cannibalism to fuel this sad theory. In 1846, there was our ill-fated Donner Reed party.
Yep.
Let's just stop there. In October of 1972, there was the crash of Flight 571. That includes the famous rugby team that crashed into the Andes Mountains. Of course, became a movie, but for survival, cannibalism was enacted, but only on those who are already dead. In August of 2010 is our most recent discussion. Chilean coal miners were trapped 2,295 feet below ground. They discussed in detail cannibalism as a possibility once their food stores ran out. Now, they didn't have to, thankfully.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you just said that, I was like, well, did they eat people?
Yeah, they discussed it in detail, like, we're going to die of starvation, and when I die, you're going to eat me.
Yeah.
Very similar to the discussion of what happened in the Andes Mountains.
Yeah. Not what happened in the Donner party.
No, not what I know.
Ooh, man.
No. Another very famous example was the 900-day siege of Leningrad during World War II. All supply lines were cut off to Leningrad after they had eaten all their zoo animals, their pets, birds, and all the rats. Unfortunately, gangs resorted to hunting pedestrians. While some ate the dead only, Leningrad police uncovered human carcasses draped on meat hooks. In total, over 1 million citizens died in that siege, and over 260 people were imprisoned for cannibalism.
Wow. Yikes.
That was during World War II.
Can I just share the scariest, well, not the scariest, but a scary image from the Donner party?
Yes.
So they're in the mountains trying to get, they're told there's a mountain trail, a shortcut off, over to California. They're in the mountains on top of feet and feet of snow. I think it was like 20 feet. They're chopping wood. One of them is chopping wood.
I hate this story.
And the head of the axe falls off the handle and into the snow. Mm-hmm. How terrifying would that be? Like, there goes our axe. Like, I can't dig to get that.
I know.
Ooh.
It's like, God did not like these people. Or it's like, I don't know. Like, everything about that story, it's just like...
everything. There's, like, no good luck for any of them.
I don't want to draw the short straw.
Yeah.
So anyway, unfortunately for then Sheppton, the question becomes, while we know it's a mine disaster, was it a miracle or was it a murder, a monster of a murder, really? And that's the question that we'll never have answered, because all those who are part of it are now dead. Yeah. Felon passed away of old age, as did Throne. Now, personally, when I read through everything, I feel it was a miracle because it's a mining disaster. 70 feet of rubble closes off, the mine shaft. And one of them at least has to be hurt, because you're getting hit by bowling balls of debris. And in Civil War, of course, you get hit by cannonballs and you're losing legs, for crying out loud. Mm-hmm. So if Bova said I have a broken leg and I'm in extreme pain, he's not going to last 14 days because he's probably bleeding. If it's a compound fracture, he's bleeding. So there's even more problems for dehydration.
At the very least, internally.
Yeah, and then disease and the meat turning green because you're putting all that nastiness into your cut. Yeah. And then with all the different, continual drops of rubble, if you can't find a monkey shaft, that's it, know? So, I personally think, in terms of, the odds, getting 3 out of 3 ain't bad, getting them out of there.
Yeah.
And just the fact that there's no bones. I know, no body, no crime, it tends to be, our conversation, but you'd think that the guy who goes down there would have found something if they had eaten somebody.
Right. Yeah, that's the only thing. I want to, I don't believe it was murder. If they did eat him, it was because he had already died and they needed to survive. B, if they ate him, there should have been
They wouldn't even
remains.
there wouldn't have been a whole body left. You can't eat 120 pounds of meat in 14 days.
No.
But like, especially when you're stressed, your hunger actually dips. You're not hungry because your body's in that fight to survive, and you're cold.
Yeah.
So your most prescient worry is getting warm and then drinking water.
Yeah.
And then if there's time, eating something else.
Yeah.
And Felon, being a well-known and, well-versed coal miner, he's like, hey, we're going to chew on wood shards. It's going to fill our stomachs. Very similar to what was the fox in the marsh? What was that story of the guy that was the Civil War who had his guys in the marsh stuck on buttons?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pulling from the recesses of my brain, Mr. Marshman. I'm sorry for getting the whole thing wrong here. But that idea, like, you keep your salivatory glands moving, that way you won't feel dehydrated, So he was well versed in that. And so having, him and Throne chewing on wood, at least, is going to keep them...
Yeah. The guy Mel Gibson's character was based on in The Patriot.
So it must have been during the Revolutionary War, not during Civil War.
Yeah.
But and regardless, I personally feel it's a miracle. Now, it's not just because I'm Catholic, but because they saw, like, aliens too. So they could have been seeing hallucinations. Mm-hmm. But having the same hallucination...
Well, I mean, if one guy says, like, do you see that? And the other one's like, yeah. He's like, he looks like an alien. Yeah. Like, they could be, like, imprinting, similar to how hypnotists work, like a guided hallucination. One starts seeing something and says it, and then suddenly the other one can see it now, too. That's possible.
Well, and these guys did go through, like, some tests and whatever, or I was reading in the text, and psychologists, like, don't want to admit that they could have seen something otherworldly. So they said, they don't show any signs of psychosis. So we're gonna go with probably hallucination. Like, they couldn't do anything else.
Yeah.
But I thought this was a good story to tell, just because this weekend was supposed to be our spiritual event, the Paracon, with our super best friend Kevin Paul, who unfortunately had to have some major surgery in his healing, so he couldn't put it on. So looking forward to that next year. Super best friend Kevin Paul. Looking forward to it. Can't wait. But I thought this was a beautiful story because, he is a very into, like, mysticism and, the miraculous that can happen every day to people, and, the idea of, like, talking to ghosts and having something like a guiding hand there. Doesn't gotta be a pope, get over yourself, Felon. But, so I thought it was kind of like a nice little homage to our darling Kevin out there who's getting healed still. Yeah. So what do you think? Do you think it was a miracle, or do you think it was a murder?
No, definitely not murder. 100%. And like you said, like 2 out of 3, like anyone would say, like, that's a miracle. That's incredible that they survived. That anyone survived 14 days in complete darkness.
Well, and the real miracle, I think, was the amount of people above ground who were helping. I didn't even touch into that because I wanted to focus on just the guys under the ground. Yeah. But what was happening above ground? Salvation Army was there. Red Cross was there. Like, they're making a bunch of food every day. Mm-hmm. People are there working. They refused to go home. They were sleeping on the ground. They're going back to work. Like, it was amazing, the round-the-clock work that was happening to get those men out. Yeah. So the real miracle was just the amount of, humanitarian help that was above ground. Mm-hmm. And from what the book said, too, David Felon and his brother weren't really on talking terms. And so this brought them back together. And again, it's his brother who, like, says, drill here. Yeah. So it's crazy, too, that, like, this saves their relationship. Yeah. So I think it's a miracle.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, when something this serious happens, any petty dispute that you had before is gone out the window.
Yep. But this is a spooky podcast, PJ.
I'm ready.
So I want to leave you with the lyrics to a song that came out after this miracle happened, because after people heard the story of the possible cannibalism, songs were invented. This is for you. Trapped in a mine that had caved in, and everyone knows the only ones left was Joe and me and Tim. When they broke through to pull us free, the only ones left to tell a tale was Joe and me. Timothy, Timothy, where on earth did you go? Timothy, Timothy, God, why don't I know? Hungry as hell, no food to eat, and Joe said that he would sell his soul for just a piece of meat. Water enough to drink for 2, and Joe said to me, I'll take a swig and then there's some for you. Timothy, Timothy, Joe was looking at you. Timothy, Timothy, God, what did we do? I must have blacked out just about then, 'cause the very next thing I could see was light at the day again. My stomach was full as it could be, and nobody ever got around to finding Timothy. Timothy, Timothy, where on earth did you go? Timothy, Timothy, God, why don't I know? Written by Rupert Holmes. Copyright 1971. By Jordan Herman Holmes Publishing Incorporated. The Universal Music Corporation, ASCAP. All rights reserved. But there you go.
Wow.
Hope you enjoyed that. But yeah, 1971 came out after this.
Yep.
Timothy, Timothy, where did you go?
Hmm.
What a happy song.
Yeah, right.
And with that, listeners, have a lovely week. And as always, think spooky thoughts. And please email us, Facebook us, tell us your tales of woe and interest. Goodbye.